Good afternoon, everyone. So today we have two amazing presenters on the call. The first speaker will be Ross Ginovich. He's the president of Cooperative Processing Resources. And our second presenter will be Jackie Boyce. She's a senior director of partner relations at Money Management International. Now, today they'll be sharing some best practices on how to secure your agency's network and how to train your staff to be aware of new security risks. They'll also be sharing what training and testing measures can be used to maintain your client's privacy. And with that said, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Ross Ginovich. He's going to take it from here. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am honored to be here. So I'm going to jump right in. Moving to the next slide, please. So today I want to start sort of big at a kind of a global level, go down to the agency level, and then go down to sort of the individual. What can you do to keep yourself and your agency and your agency's clients' data secure? Next slide, please. So one more, please. Next slide. So today, the objectives are to create awareness. What are the cybersecurity trends? What are the risks? What are the threats that are facing your agency? Talk about a roadmap on how you can take your agencies forward to mitigate some of these risks. And then toward the end, provide some ready actions that you can take right now to protect yourself and your agency. Next, please. So why is it important to you, or why should this topic be important to you? Well, first of all, operational security, right? You want to make sure that your agency is a going concern, that somebody doesn't impact negatively your ability to operate and help your community and create positive outcomes and impacts on your clients. The second one is maintaining client privacy. As you know, that's imperative. People expect privacy, and so maintaining their privacy and keeping their data confidential is very important. And finally, legal compliance. There are compliance on most companies, federal, state, local laws, industry laws, government laws, which we'll get into. And every one of us on this call has to comply with those imperatives. So next slide, please. So understanding the threat landscape. So there are a lot of people going after your data. In fact, the World Economic Forum has only one technology threat or risk to the world on their 2-year and 10-year forecast, and that's cybercrime and cyber insecurity. I mean, to them, it's right there with food insecurity, natural disasters. This is something that is affecting the global community. And we are not exempt here. So next slide, please. So some scary stuff, right? Cyber attacks in the world happen every 39 seconds. There's some that affected our industry. Equifax in 2017 affected 145 million consumers. They stole a lot of data, a lot of very important data. Also T-Mobile, that was almost a year ago now, 37 million customers. Closer to home to us, we're in Dallas. For those of you close by, Dallas City Hall was attacked and breached about 6-8 months ago, and they destroyed a lot of data. And this destruction of data, they just destroyed police evidence. So they had to let criminals go free because they no longer had the evidence. I mean, that's some scary stuff. On a personal level, I worked at a healthcare company, and our security department, we were fighting an average of 1,700 attacks every hour to get our data. We had a lot of data, a lot of healthcare data, and literally 1,700 attacks an hour. So the threat is very much real. Next slide, please. So for the financial sector, the sector we're in is number 2 after technology. They're always after, technology companies, but as far as if you look at all the other major industry sectors, we're number 2 because we have what they want. And so the question then is, what is it that they want? Let's move to the next slide, please. So the number one threat, well, one more, but the number one threat to the agencies is a phishing attack. Okay. Now, if we were talking 20 years ago, the biggest threat to every company was an internal threat, a disgruntled employee or a contractor, or it was almost always an internal threat. And like I said, 20 years ago, that was a 95% threat. Today, it's the opposite. Internal is about 5%, external is about 95%. And the way they get to you is through phishing. So the question is, what is phishing? It's basically an email. It looks real. It looks like something you expect. A DocuSign. I've been getting a lot of DocuSign documents, probably about 10 a day. It looks like a DocuSign document, or it looks like something from your bank. Hey, somebody tried to access your account, or you're locked out of your account. They're trying to get better and better. And they're actually using AI now to create their emails to fix their grammar. So it looks real. And usually there's some kind of an urgency to do something. And we're all busy and we kind of go, oh my goodness, we need to take a look at what the issue is. Well, 46% of those emails are phishing. Now, ransomware is in the news a lot. It's not as prevalent as people would think. It does happen quite substantially, but phishing is your number one threat. So next slide, please. So you're sitting there in, Houma, Louisiana, or Elmira, New York, or some small agency, and you're going, look, we're just a tiny agency. Who would want our data? Well, there are four groups. The first ones are script kiddies. They're not very skilled. They will attack anything, and they mostly do it for street cred. Hey, I hacked somebody, right? So, and they can go tell their friends. Not a huge threat, but a threat nevertheless. The next one is hacktivists. Luckily, the industry we're in, we're trying to help people. So we're probably less of a target for them, but they attack targets that they perceive to be a threat to people, or are unfair, or are, in their world, they are the bad guys. So the hacktivists go after them. And again, they typically deface, or they try to expose data like emails, but they really don't destroy. They usually don't steal. Next slide, please. So who you do need to worry about are these two groups. One is the criminal syndicates, and the other one is the state actors. Okay, so the criminal syndicates, they're 80% of the breaches. They are very skilled, very, very skilled. They do this for money. This is their job. They do this 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're very skilled. So they're trying to monetize the information. They're the ones that really want the info. That's how they, pay their mortgage. And then lastly, state actors, typically Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. You hear about these folks in the news. They do it for what's called a strategic hack, and they want that information to use it more as in a strategic hack. So what does that mean? Going to the next slide. So what is it that you have that they want? First of all, your bank accounts. Something like 20 billion was stolen from small businesses over the last year in the US. So it's a huge number. They want your operating funds. So that's the first thing. The next thing is they want your HR data, all your staff. I'll give you an example. I worked with this company a number of years ago. They hired a couple of temps to organize their files, scan some documents, do this. While those temps were there, they stole everyone's identity and sold it. Well, now they don't have to show up on your premise to steal your data. They can do it remotely because it's all online. So it's a huge, huge threat. The other thing is identity theft of your clients, steal the demographics. And then finally, steal the credit card information or any kind of account data you may have on your clients. And again, theft of a credit card, I think right now, Good American Express on the black market is about $25. So, visas are less, but still, there's money to be made with stolen credit cards. So next slide, please. So if for some weird reason something happens, this could be sort of a going out of business event for an agency. The cost today of a breach is $165 per record. So if you have 1,000 client records, by the time you clean all this up, if there was a breach, you're talking about $165,000. I know we can't write that kind of a check, and I don't know how many of you can either, but that's a huge, huge amount of money. And like I said, it could be a very, it could be a terminal event for a lot of agencies. So now that I've scared everybody enough, so then the question is, all right, so what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? Next slide, please. So the first thing you must do is create risk governance. So what does that mean? Governance is a process for overseeing the people and technology together to mitigate risks, okay? Typically, that is something boards and directors and or management teams of agencies do. According to PwC, that was the #1 key topic with boards in 2023. But at the same time, most board members don't think they have enough information, both as knowledge and from the management team, to make the decision. So why is that important? Next slide, please. According to KPMG, 77% think this is a competitive advantage over everybody else. Gartner predicts that we may see legislation in the US to hold directors and CEOs personally liable for any breach. This is already happening in the EU, especially in Germany. So if you're a director of a company in Germany and there's a breach, you may go to jail. So that's it's pretty good incentive to get moving. So next slide, please. So then now that we have a governance model, what do? Well, we have to have a compliance model. And you're like, well, wait a minute, what am I complying with? There's two buckets of compliance. One is legislative, one is industry specific. And I know you've all heard these acronyms. GLBA, that protects PII, personally identifiable information. You have HIPAA, you have Fair Credit Reporting Act if you pull credit information. There's specific data breach laws, there's privacy laws. CCPA is an example out of California. I know that Massachusetts has some pretty strong laws, and Texas, surprisingly, where we sit, just passed a law that went into effect. It's a very strong law. Further, industry, PCI, if you have any kind of credit card data, and you must have people say, hey, they opt in, opt out, and you kind of do that to protect the agency. Next slide, please. So what do? So now that you have governance, you have to put in place what are called controls. And you're like, well, where do I get these? Well, there are all kinds of frameworks where you can get these controls. And what a control is, it is what you do, the process, and how you execute that process to comply with best practices or regulatory practices. And you have two kinds of controls, primary and compensating. Primary controls is sort of more theoretical. And if you're larger or have more staff, primary controls are your ways to go forward. If you do not, if you're smaller, what you need to do is put in what are called compensating controls. They need to meet the intent of the control, similar level, and go above and beyond. So I'll give you an example. In primary, you must have two people to set up a vendor and another person to pay the vendor. That's the example everybody uses. But if you only have one person working in accounting or in your accounts, receivable, accounts payable, you need to be able to still do that. So you need to put in some other control, whether the director signs off, somebody else, another person signs off, to where not one person is doing the job. It's separation of duties kind of a conversation. So you must have primary and or compensating controls going forward. And as all of you who've been through an audit know, you must provide them evidence. So next slide, please. So what do? Now that you know you have a framework, you have governance, what do? So there are a number of frameworks. There's COSO, COBIT, this, that, the other. What I'm presenting here is what's called the NIST framework. This is the national standards. This is the US government. It's a simple framework that's implementable by everyone, easy to understand, easy to implement, easy to create audit evidence for. So if we can go to the next slide, we can go through the details. So the first one you do is identify. You identify what are your key assets. If you're a small agency, everybody's at home, you're all remote, your technology assets are people's laptops, your phones. If you're in a big company, you have an office, you have servers, you have networks, you have firewalls, you have all kinds of stuff. So the question is, you identify what do you need to protect. Then you work with your IT provider and create a list of what is the most important thing needs to be controlled. Then typically your IT provider, unless again you have an internal IT department, they implement a plan to protect your assets. Next slide, please. Then they work, typically they put tools in place to detect if there's any kind of an incident. And it doesn't have to be a breach, just any kind of a suspicious incident. Then you have to have a response plan. You respond. And typically, again, your MSP will take the lead, investigate, and figure out if there's a breach or not, if there was any kind of, if there was anything beyond the suspicion. And moving, next slide. And then finally, what you need to do is then take recovery. Was something stolen? Not. What do you report to? Who do you report to? What do you have to provide in case something did happen? And then, of course, repeat, right? This is a continual process. This is not something you do once. This is something you continually repeat. Now, going forward, what's your best step beyond the MSP? You really need to, next slide, please. You need to create employee awareness and training. So first thing is creating a culture of security awareness, right? A lot of agencies go, well, that's just an IT thing. Those guys are worried about it. We don't have to worry about it. Not true. I think all your staff have to be aware. And again, based on the first set of slides, phishing is, if you're going to do one thing, phishing. So create mock phishing attacks, you create good and bad clicks, and you do gamification. So typically what happens is we do that here. And typically if you do a bunch of good clicks, you find the phishing emails, you're rewarded. Starbucks cards work really well over here. If you do bad clicks, if you do click on a fake phishing more than twice, you probably have to get retrained. So you gamify it, you reward good behavior, and then you not quite punish, but you make people go through training. Okay. And some places can create very role specific programs to do this. Next slide, please. So the people who are most well known in the industry are KnowBe4, and they do training, they do phishing simulations, they can do all this, they can track everything, and it's probably a good one-stop shop for a small agency. A lot of HR, if your HR is outsourced, HR providers, PEO providers, all have that kind of training, and they all have learning management systems to keep track. So typically it's built in already into one of your providers. You probably should take advantage of it. Moving on. So I've been talking about MSPs. So to me, next slide, please. So to me, your MSP is your closest ally in this war. An MSP is a managed service provider. That's your outsourced IT department if you do not have one. One of the key things I will stress is costs should be balanced with risk. It's easy to pick the cheapest provider. And I've seen cases where, it's, one of our employees' husband, he can come in here, at night and he can work on stuff. Yes, but is that person really knowledgeable? Is that person really aware of what's going on? Can they really help you manage and respond to these risks that I have been talking about? So next slide, please. So if you do go with an MSP, here's some things to keep in mind. Contract length. Be wary of contracts longer than 3 years. Things change too much, okay? Be careful of what are called evergreen clauses. So if you don't give them the right kind of notice, it renews for another 3 years, right? So be careful there. Termination clauses. What is notice? Can they terminate you? Can you terminate them? You need to really kind of understand how that works. Breaches. What is a breach and what is your responsibility? What is their responsibility and what is the cure, contractual cure? What's their responsibility to you? Fixed and variable pricing. This is something I just mentioned. If you were in the office with COVID or for whatever reason, you're now virtual. So are you still paying for support a network you no longer have because you don't have an office anymore? So make sure your pricing is adjustable or adjusted based on your business need. Okay. And then a lot of places have an automatic annual increase. They go to COLA, they say it's a 3.4%. We'll just update it. Is that warranted, really? Okay. And again, finally, simple language. Make sure you, the agency, understand the contract. Next slide, please. So I've been throwing out a lot of stuff. And now the question is, okay, this is all great, but what can I myself do now to protect myself and my agency? All right, so some very short, brief, but effective things. Number one, passwords. I know it's 2023. It's almost 24. And I know I probably don't have to say it, but you would be shocked at how many people I've seen that don't have a passcode on their phone, right? So that's still a valid advice. Number two, anything to do with money, any kind of accounts, operating accounts, credit bureaus, anything you do external that deals with money, put two-factor authentication. That's when they text you or email you or something to verify it's really you. That's really key this day and age. So depending on the type of system, if I'm a hacker, I have tools that can guess an 8-character password within seconds. So 8 characters is not enough. The next one is email. Seen some agencies try to save money, use Gmail or Yahoo. By definition, those are not secure systems, right? So set up a branded company email, get your MSP or someone you know to configure it to be private and secure, okay? And very much be wary of emails asking for agency or client information. I see people, oh, this looks like a bank, I'll just respond. Yeah. Again, don't. Next slide, please. So software updates. Keep your computer and phone updated. Don't put it off. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's the middle of the day, it's bothersome. 45 to 60 days. If you don't do it, there will be hacks to get at your data for a system that is about 2 months. That's how long it takes to develop those hacks. So definitely do it every other month. Next is make sure you have security software. Antivirus, firewall, turn it on. Microsoft has it, Mac has it, third-party devices have it. Again, your MSP should be able to, in fact, most MSPs part of the contract, they provide that software and licensing to you by extension of the contract. So there's no reason not to do it. Some places call it DLP or EPS, so data loss protection or endpoint security. So there's some different words IT companies use, but it's antivirus software, okay? Make sure your devices are backed up. So in case somebody does encrypt you or somebody attacks it, again, make sure it's backed up and it can be restored. Next slide, please. So careful with social media. I've seen people post all kinds of stuff on social media. Then just be careful and also be careful of your privacy settings. For platforms both professionally and personally, right? Many agencies advertise on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, post stuff all the time, which is awesome. You should do it. But just make sure what are your privacy settings? What can they really see about you and your agency? Okay. And then finally, and this is so important, I think people miss it. Trust your instincts. If you are looking at something or if somebody calls you and asks questions or you're looking at something on the screen, if it feels off or you're unsure, trust your instincts, right? Don't override your instincts. I think it's just incredibly important to say this. And if you're not sure, ask for help, right? Your MSP can help you. Knowledgeable coworkers can help you. Other people can help you. So always, always, always trust your instincts. So with that, next slide, please. I want to say thank you. Again, an honor to be here with you. Thanks for listening, and I will be here through the Q&A. And if you have any questions, and if you don't feel comfortable asking them publicly, here's my contact information. Call me, email me. I will be more than happy to privately answer any security questions you may have. And with that, thank you. Ms. Ivy, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Ross, for that great presentation. And I encourage everyone on this call today to definitely reach out to him if you have any other additional questions, and he can definitely walk you through the process of any other security issues that you have. Okay, and next we're going to finish with our main presenter, Jackie Boyce.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm no security expert, but I am an end user who has worked for an agency who spent a lot of time incorporating these ideas and making sure that our workforce and our information is safe. And I want to share with you today just some of the practical things that we've done. And what you're going to see is I'm just going to echo the things that Ross has said from our practical perspective, from someone who's had to implement these things to keep our systems and people secure. Next slide. So your information security and that of your folks really depend on three things: your people, your process, and technology. Now, Ross has talked a lot about the technology, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I really want to talk to you about your people and your processes. Next slide. So let's look at your primary risk. You should know by now that your risks lie with your people and with phishing. Those are the two places where you are most vulnerable. So in order to be secure, you're going to have to present technology solutions, security solutions, testing and training and compliance solutions to really make things work well for your organization. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these. Next. Your staff is your greatest vulnerability, but they're also your first line of defense. So as we talk through this, I want to point out all of the areas where your agency is opened up to cyber attack. And a lot of those have to do with your people and the ways they get in. But your people are also your first line of defense. So their knowledge, their training, and the things that you do to enforce your policies and procedures are what are going to keep your agency and your folks safe. Next. So what I have here is kind of a list, long checklist actually, of the things that we've implemented at MMI to keep our people secure, our information secure, all the things that go along with information security and remote work. So early on in the pandemic, we sent everybody home to work, just like you did. We were fortunate in MMI because we already had a pretty robust virtual workforce. But even then, we recognized that we need to make some adjustments and additions to the processes and procedures that we had in place to really make it more effective for everyone. So I'm going to go through a couple of things. I'm going to hit the high points on these things, but I'm happy to share additional information or some of the things that we've done to implement some of these if you want to contact me offline. So to begin with, you need to hire good people. That's all there is to it. You need employee background checks. And that means people who have access to sensitive information get a higher level of background check than someone who is, going to empty the trash can. So that's the starting point. Good people. And then you need confidentiality agreements. You actually need to put things in writing. And you'll hear me repeat that throughout this presentation, because the more you put things in writing and the more people see and agree to your policies and procedures, the more effective they will be. So put it in writing, fully disclose your expectations, and make sure that everybody has clarity around them. So every employee that you hire should sign an agreement and to follow your confidentiality and security standards. Restrict access to electronic information. Everyone in your organization does not need access to sensitive information. In most organizations, probably too many people have access. So take a look at what's sensitive and make limitations. Put it as a need to know access only. Everybody does not need to know your accounting. So only those who would need access will get it. Also, that thorough background check is really important for those people who are going to have access to that super sensitive information. You should also limit access to account numbers. So in instances where you have clients and consumers account numbers, those should be limited to people who really need to know. In our CMS, once information has been entered, the last four digits of a client's Social Security number are all that are displayed. So yes, the counselor had it when they entered the information, but once it's there, it's not displayed for the next user. Also, account numbers are done the same way. Now, people with higher levels of authority have the ability to go in and get that information, and those who need it actually see it displayed, but not really routinely to our front view agents. And then one of the other concerns with working remotely that I hear a lot from smaller agencies especially is, how do you monitor these people? And no, at MMI, we don't have video cameras on our employees. We have not gone to that level, but we do use technology to make sure that we are able to understand and know what our employees are doing. So our employees log into a remote workstation. We're able to see that they're logged in. We have notifications and reminders in place for folks if they are not logged in or if they're late getting there. We have telephony that lets us see when people are on the phone and actually listen live or record their calls. But our employees also sign an agreement for teleworking. It's a privilege to get to work remotely. Just think of the commute that you saved and all of those other things that you get to not do because you're now working from home. But there are some responsibilities that you have to expect from your staff when they do work from home. And so we have our employees sign a teleworking agreement that really lines out our expectations in black and white. Everything is expected from someone who is getting to work remotely. We also require a picture periodically of the remote workstation. We understand that everybody does not have an office at home, and that they have to set up their workstation in other places. But it's important that that location is somewhat secure, certainly private. We expect privacy when our folks are talking on the phone to our consumers. So you want to know where they're setting up that workstation. Use your tools and technology to monitor what they're doing, both on their computer and on their phone. And if you have concerns about an employee, then restrict them. I'm not saying that every employee we've ever had has been successful at remote work, because they just haven't. And so we have requested that some employees over time return to an office to work because it was just a better environment for them. And you know your people. And if that's the case, then you'll need to make that adjustment. We also have password activated screensavers. So if I step away from my desk for any period of time, my screen goes dark. And before I can get back to it, I have to put in a password. And that just prevents, even if you're in an office, that prevents someone else from seeing the work that's on your desktop, especially in the event that you forget to log out or close down your system. Encrypt and password protect information. A lot of information at MMI gets encrypted. But one of the things that we do is our agents cannot, or even myself, frankly, I can't send an email with a social security number or an account number on it. It's blocked by our system. So that is one of the ways that we ensure that information about clients doesn't leave our office. Other secure information should be considered as well. You should have written guidance for your virtual workforce for keeping all sensitive information secure and how you're going to dispose of that information. Think about your counselor sitting at their desk writing notes. Lots of counselors jot things down as they're going through counseling. Maybe they jotted down the consumer social security number. So you need to have a policy that says that counselor will shred that or place it in some secured locked place after work. So you can't have those kinds of things laying around someone's home office. All right, laptops, computers, remote access. We've talked about all these things. Printing, saving. You should really discourage people from saving any documents on a local disk or on a laptop or in your workstation. At MMI, we have a virtual network and we save all of our documents in a designated space that is secure in our environment. We don't save documents or do our work on our laptops directly. And so that secures the information that we're collecting. We also can't get into our network from just any computer. The computer or laptop that we use to get there has to be configured by our IT staff before we can ever even access it with all of the other passwords and things that you have to get there. And then our general staff don't have printers or scanners at their workstations. We have gone to a paperless environment. We don't have paper files. We keep everything stored electronically, and we don't allow our staff to print client documents or scan them or have them at their local station. So in order to have a printer or scanner at MMI, you have to be at a management level and have a real business need to have those. It just helps keep us secure when we don't have paper floating around. Okay, next slide. We'll talk a lot about secure access. Our remote machines don't have access for storing data. And this is really something that is required by a lot of our partners. And certainly if you are in debt and budget work, it's required by almost all creditor partners that employees cannot save data from your system to either a hard drive or a thumb drive or disk drive or anything like that. You don't have the ability to even allow for that to happen. Our laptops and computers are configured in such a way that it can't be attached to a home printer or a scanner. You could do it, but it's not going to connect. It's not going to allow that employee to even print those documents. Same thing with a thumb drive, disk drive. You just can't. It's been blocked. So that works really, really well for us. Another thing that we have done is we've blocked certain websites. And this one hit us really hard this year, I have to say. Even to do regular business, a lot of times I will click on a website and find that it has been blocked by our administrators. And I had to put in a request to get access to it. In fact, when Ellie was setting up this, I couldn't get into the doodle poll to tell them what time I was available, simply because it's one of those questionable sites. It's okay, but it's just blocked by our administrators. We also block foreign countries. Ross alluded to that earlier. We don't allow emailing and web access to China, Russia, some of the other countries that have just been problematic in the past. As Ross said, we also block email from Gmail, Hotmail, all of those things. Our employees cannot open up our web browser and access their Gmail, their Hotmail, any of those things. They're just opening yourself up to problems. And then when it comes to disposal of information, because we're collecting and storing a lot of information electronically, and we know that laptops and all of these things get outdated when those hard drives and things like that have to be destroyed. They're not just stuck in a closet or dumped in someone's garbage. They are officially destroyed through an agency that actually destroys them and gives us proof that these things have been destroyed. And then there are concerted efforts at MMI for us to have cyber awareness initiatives at all times. So we know that phishing emails are the top method by which cyber predators gain access to your system, to personal information, introduce malware into your network and other malicious attacks. And so as an organization, this is our top priority in the InfoSec world. So we conduct ongoing phishing campaigns and communicate with our teams throughout the month about cyber awareness. Being aware and keeping it at the top of your staff's mind is the only way to keep everybody safe. If you don't think about it, they won't think about it either. So we have employed KnowBe4, and they do our phishing campaign work. And it's been incredibly successful for us. When we started with them a couple of years ago, our fail rate was in the very, very high 50s. That means more than 50% of the people clicked on these fake emails. We weren't doing so good. And we have really beefed up our awareness And in our this last month, our campaign, we were at just 2%. So just 2% from 50% plus is amazing. Our staff is doing a great job of not clicking on things that they shouldn't be. And keep in mind, while we have no before going on, we have real attempts at phishing coming through. And so we have to depend on our staff to recognize those. We do that by lots of training. We tell our employees about our safeguards plans. We make sure that they know what they are. And that means an annual awareness campaign where everyone has to go in and basically be retrained. It's really a great system. It's kind of fun. We've made it entertaining and interesting so that everybody feels more invited to go through the information, but we do require it, and it comes with a test at the end. And then through our awareness campaigns, we're constantly reminding people of all of the risk out there. So we use our HR manual to line out these processes. We use our internal social channels. We use Yammer, and we remind people constantly of the risk and the attacks and what's going on, in addition to remedial training for those who have phishing failures. We also incorporate a recognition program, which Ross alluded to as well. We want to reward those folks who do well, and then those who don't do so well will go through remedial training. And then we have a term called removing failure events. And really, it's just our way of saying, if you continue to fail the phishing test, it's going to be an issue. And so with the first failure, you're going to go through remedial training. If there's an additional failure, you're going to go through some coaching. And if you continue to fail, you're going to be going through some really more serious, escalated conversations with your manager, because it is that important. Our information security officer also keeps a list of those folks who fail as well as those who pass. So we always know who's doing a good job here and who is struggling. So let's take a closer look at phishing. Next slide. So you know the definition of phishing. Ross has talked about it for sure. And it is interesting, though, that it really did come from the term fish for. People are looking for your information, however you call it. They want your sensitive financial information, your system login credentials, or anything else that they can get and hopefully sell. It's interesting, though, that phishing is so widespread, so fine-tuned these days, that there are actually different names for different types of phishing. And it sounds like the names are just crazy. Phishing, spear phishing, smishing, vishing, and whaling. I mean, they've come up with all kinds of names for these things, but they all have a different target and a different intention. Next slide. Just for your information, I'll run through these really quickly. You know what phishing is. Spear phishing is a really highly personalized attack on someone specific. Smishing is SMS, text messaging. Who thought that those text messages you're getting are maybe also malware? Vishing is voice messaging. And this one gets scarier all the time because with AI, they're better and better able to make those voice messages sound like someone you know and care about. And then whaling are those that really go in for the CEO or other executives of a company and generally are requesting that they transfer money. Next slide. So this is specific to MMI, and I thought I would share this with you because we are constantly being phished, that's for sure. And these are our top 10. So the top 10 are FedEx, UPS, delivery kind of notices. And I get some of those all the time. Some of them are real. And so you'll have to really be careful before you start clicking on those. Easy pass toll violations, because we have folks that commute. YouTube videos, sharing one of my favorites. Who hasn't seen that one on Facebook? Voice over IP, you have a new voicemail, and it looks very much like your voicemail system, only it's not. IT requests using a strange email address. HR and payroll requests also using a strange email address, because I recognize that these are not ours internally. A notification that your software is expiring and you need to click on something to renew it. Workflow approvals, we have approvals for vacation and leave and for expense reimbursements and that sort of thing. Government IDs and TIN validation links, anything coming from the government, something that looks like it comes from HUD, we get those things all the time. And the biggest one, and Ross said the same, are Google Docs. So a lot of us use Google Docs in the things that we do, or some sort of external document. And I probably get 2 or 3 of these a week. And I have to look at them because we do get some legitimate activity through Google Docs. And so it is always a struggle, and one where I have to step back and take some time to look through it to make sure it's legitimate before I click on anything. Next slide. So here's an example. This one just came in the other day. It looks very much like something I have received. It actually came from someone with one of my coworkers received it and said, look at this one. And so it looks like a Google Docs. It looks like something we might use in our business. And it also says Google up there, but it's not. It's definitely phishing. And the recipient of this reached out to someone else first and said, what do you think about this? Took a look at it and determined that it was phishing before we move forward. And you really do have to just stop and take a look at everything in this. You can hover over the links and see where these links take you. If the links don't take you to where you would expect, never click on it. And if you have any doubt, don't click on it. Next one. This one came to me recently and I almost clicked on it. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, who doesn't want Taylor Swift tickets? And this came from my boss. Her name is Michelle Jones. But the things that got me before I clicked on anything was that her email address is not manager@moneymanagement.org, but this one's pretty good, y'all. And then I don't know Jennifer Carrington, and I don't know that she knows, but there were too many red flags. Also, that external bar across there means it came from outside of her environment. And if she was sending an email from me to me from her MMI address, that would not be there. So this one was pretty good. And this one is the kind that generates excitement because, wow, it's Taylor Swift tickets. Let me click on this really quickly. And it also has urgency in there because the tickets are going to be gone. So these are the kinds of things that you have to constantly be on the lookout for and talk to your staff about. Taylor Swift, though, this one almost got me. Next one. So I did reach out to our internal InfoSec folks, and I asked her, I said, if you're an agency without a really large budget and you need to do some really common things that would get them the most bang for their buck, what do you think they should do? And so she gave me these 3 things. One of them is penetration testing of your website. It costs about $5,000. It lets you know where your vulnerabilities lie, and it's important if you operate a website or a network. And then she suggested that if you're someone who needs to be in the know, that you get on the list of these agencies and state authorities who offer free notifications. Some of them may be a small fee, but they let you know what the common, most recent emergent threats and vulnerabilities are for you. And just keep that in the front of your mind. And then the last thing she said is you need to manage your vendors. So you're accustomed to doing business with folks, but now more than ever, we're sharing data with others. You need to know what they're going to do with your data, and you need to know if they've ever been breached, because you need to make sure that you're sharing data and technology with other companies that are employing safety measures as well. Next slide. So another thing that she suggested is use your internal email system, the controls that come with it. And in ours, I mentioned earlier, we have this external banner that pops up. We use Outlook email internally, and it pops up and tells me that an email has come from me from an external source. And that really helps me hone in first whether this is something I should click on or not. And then we periodically change this banner because your eyes get used to looking at it. So our next version of this will probably be a bright orange color. And the word external is there, but it can say anything, however you choose to label it. And then the next thing she said is folks need longer and more complex passwords. So everything that you need to have passworded should actually have a 14-character password. And I'll show you why in just a second. And you should also strongly discourage the reuse of passwords. So in an example she shared with me, 23andMe, you guys know who that is, 6.9 million users were breached on October 1st. And of those, 15% of them had used their password over multiple sites, and it made it easier for them to get there. And so for the 14,000 people who had used that password multiple places, they were able to connect more data about that individual, also get their DNA, but to connect all the data that they had associated with some of the other websites where they had used that password over and over again. So super important that you don't reuse your password. Next slide. So this is just a little graphic about passwords and how quickly and easily a hacker can get to your password. So we all know that you want numerical, upper, lowercase, special characters, all of those things, and that's a requirement. But really, I would have thought that passwords of 5, 6, 7, 8 characters, you're probably good. But really, until you get to 9 or 10 characters in one of these more complex passwords, you're not really safe. And you're really pretty safe when you get to 10 or 11. So keep in mind that the longer the password, the less likelihood someone is going to hack into your email or other passworded application. Next slide. So in closing, I just want to remind you that as technology improves, your risks are going to grow, and you're constantly going to need to consider and reconsider how you're going to protect data. And remember, your frontline staff is your first defense. But in order for them to be effective, you've got to train them, you've got to test them, you've got to have the security measures, you've got to provide the technology, but you also have to enforce compliance. Next slide. Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you today, and here's my contact information. I'm happy to join in with Ross and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jackie. My name is Christy. I'm the Housing Policy Director. I'll cover the Q&A section, and thank you as well, Ross. So we have a few questions in the Q&A box as well as chat. So first question is for Ross. If we are capturing disability or accessibility data, do these trigger a need to have a HIPAA approach? Is there biometric data that we might obtain that would require increased disclosure or security? And then the follow-up question is, anything that our websites or portals capture that are a liability?
Okay. First of all, just want to shout out to Jackie. What a great presentation. Really hits the, oh, fantastic. So disability accessibility, that is not HIPAA unless you're being treated for it. In my opinion, that is covered under Graham Leach Bliley. That is PII about you, right? HIPAA has to be a treatment. It's a diagnosis or a treatment plan or anything to do with billing about a treatment. That's what HIPAA covers. So is that PII protected individual information? Yes, it is, but it is covered under Graham Leach. So Now, second question, increased disclosure or security. So everything should be encrypted. Once it's encrypted, I think you're covered. And I think Jackie mentioned it several times as well. Once it's encrypted, you're covered for PCI, HIPAA, Graham Leach, a bunch of other things. So there's that. So security is pretty consistent and you could be covered. Now, anything your websites or portals capture. I don't know what you guys capture, but there's two concepts. One is called minimum use, and the other one is called zero trust, right? So number one, you need to capture the minimum amount of data you need to deliver that service to the consumer, okay? That's in most privacy legislation. So from that perspective, that's my advice. I don't know what's on your website, but again, don't capture information that is potentially used for marketing purposes until maybe later you have some relationship with a consumer. The best example I could give you is banks. My bank will pop up and go, tell us about your income, tell us about your family, tell us about this, tell us about that. Once you have an established relationship, you can ask all kinds of information. But in the beginning, what you want is minimum required to deliver a service. There's my answer. Yep. Mm-hmm.
The next question is, can you give a brief explanation of the list of types of hacks?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That was on page something. You'll see the deck. So, okay, we talked about phishing, right? Oh, Jackie gave some great examples. There's smishing, phishing, and so so there's phishing. Phishing is pretending who you are. Now, the next one is what's called a Trojan. Trojan is something that is masquerading as what it is not. So it used to be people would download games. You have to have an executable to cause harm. These days, you don't. You can download a video. You can download especially a PDF file or a Word document. Inside of it would be a script that is executed unbeknownst to you that captures your ID, password, certain information off your phone or off your machine and sends it to a server, typically, Asia, Middle East, somewhere where you can't get to it by US law. So that's what a Trojan is. The next thing is ransomware. Ransomware is you click on a link, typically through phishing, that takes you to a website. That website does what's called a drive-by. Once you load that into your browser, it actually loads some piece of software onto your computer. It's usually tiny. Then that piece of software goes out to a server, usually again, Eastern Europe, Asia, wherever, downloads more stuff, and then explores your machine, your network, and then starts encrypting things. And it pops up a screen, says, we've encrypted everything, pay us some money, Bitcoin usually, and then we'll give you your data back or not, depending on, and I saw there's a question on that later, so we'll come back to that. Crypto mining. Crypto mining is kind of a funny one. That's usually done by websites, unscrupulous websites. You go and you're reading something or you're shopping. There's one site that added on there, it's a shopping site, and they download a script into your browser, and using your computer, your power, your electricity, they are mining Bitcoins while you are shopping. That happens apparently 5% of the time. The other one is browser hijacking. That's typically where you go to Amazon.com, but it takes you to another website that looks like Amazon, and it goes, oh, you've expired, please log in. You've logged into a fake website. It triggers an alert. Somebody will then go in, take your username and ID, log in, and start buying stuff with your account. That's why I talked about two-factor authentication. Info stealer, very similar. It puts up a fake website to steal your data. Botnet is basically, it turns your computer into a zombie. It's typically called as a zombie PC, and they use your computer to attack other victims. And the funny thing about a botnet, it doesn't have to be your computer. It could be your microwave oven. It could be your refrigerator. It could be your camera, security camera. It could be your thermostat. So they've taken devices and turned them into botnets. RAT is a remote access Trojan. So not only does it do a Trojan, but it opens up a hole in your computer where they can take control, and they literally see what you see. They turn on the webcam without turning on the little light. They could see you, and they could see what you're doing, what you're typing, and they could watch you throughout the day. And you go, okay, I need to pay my bills. It's 8 o'clock at night. Need to use my computer. They watch you. They go to, you go to Chase. You log in, et cetera, et cetera. They can see exactly what you've done, and that's what a rat does. So there we go. That's all the ones I had on the page.
Thank you. And it looks like we have some additional questions in the chat from Miss Ivy. So the first question, for smaller agencies, what are some affordable methods of securing their network if they're on a budget?
Jackie actually mentioned it. See if your network could be cloud-based, right? The cloud vendors have incredible security. That Google spends $6 billion on security, something like that. Azure spends $5 billion on security. So they spend a lot of money. So create a virtual network using a cloud provider. That's probably the best advice I can give you. You use Google Apps, use Office 365, use those kinds of things to create a network that is in the cloud. That to me would be the easiest thing to do.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how damaging are the repercussions of clicking on a phishing link or email, and what immediate steps should be taken if clicked?
Jackie, you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, they can be pretty damaging in that any of those links are where Trojans and ransomware get into your system. So it's not just about somebody sent an email. I mean, there's something nefarious underneath there that they're trying to accomplish, and clicking on those things opens the door to your network, your system. So yeah, it's damaging. And what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
What are immediate steps that should be taken if clicked?
Well, in our case, the immediate step, and I've done it. I'm going to be honest. I failed. I did fail. A Google Doc thing got me. A big screen pops up and tells you in red that you have just failed the test. And so having that like in your face is important. Like when people click on these things and they fail, in your testing environment, they need to know they failed. So first and foremost, it's in your face. On the back end, when they actually click on something, malware or something like that, that is real and not a test, then I would hope that you have security systems in place that are going to prevent those things from being ingested into your system. Ross, you could probably talk more about that. I'm a user, not a tech person.
Okay, so there are things that I mentioned, DLP, data loss protection, right? That's what Jackie actually mentioned it. We have that as well, where you can't send an email with someone's social security number. You can't send an email that has something that's got 4444 numbers. That's a credit card, right? So we have the same kind of system. So typically, if you have those, that's sort of first line of attack. Now, if you already clicked on it, it starts working pretty immediately. So it's not something you can, go to the wall and unplug it, right? It doesn't take seconds or minutes. It's a fraction of a second. So the damage could have already been done. Now, if you're lucky, it may just take you to a website asking for information. And if it doesn't look good, just exit the website. Don't do anything, right? So if you're lucky and it takes you to like, a browser hijack or one of the other things, you just don't do anything. But if it already loaded something on your machine, yeah. There's nothing else.
True.
So prevention, I'll just add, preventing that is more important than anything. And it takes awareness, constant reminders, having this in your face to get people not to click on these things.
Certainly. And I recommend looking at the email address, ensuring that it's familiar to you and that the message looks real as opposed to just copy pasted. And then another question is, if attacked by ransomware, do you recommend paying the hacker? What are your options? Can you get your information back?
Okay, couple of things. So options, make sure you have a good backup. Make sure you test the restoration of your data. Can you get your information back? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes you'll pay the ransom and they're like, okay, now we're going to publish all your proprietary information give us more money, right? It just depends on which gang of thieves hit you with that. Let me answer the first part of paying the hackers. There is a bill in Congress right now making payment of ransomware a crime, because more times than not, you're supporting terrorism. These things are literally, I'm not being dramatic here. That's why they're passing this bill, because a lot of nefarious places do the encryption, get money, and they fund terrorism. And so there literally is a bill to say you cannot pay ransomware. So at that point, you don't really have a choice. You have to, clean up the machine, and hopefully your backups work.
Okay, thank you. And those were all the questions. Jackie, let me know if you have any more input on those
We
questions.
do have 2 more questions. I'm sorry, Christy. Oh, 3 more.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Okay,
I guess it popped
Human
up.
attacks. Okay.
Yes. So I believe, okay. So we have gone paperless. Our client files do list social security numbers. We have hired a security company, but should I be making sure the firewall is installed?
Well, you should always have a firewall, no matter what. If you have a network, you should have a firewall out to protect all traffic coming in and out. So that's a yes. The second one is you have gone paperless. Client files have, so you have scanned papers. Is that, I guess that's what I'm assuming. But so if you have a document management system, everything in there should be encrypted. So if you do have pieces of paper that have scanned, that have socials, that have credit card, whatever information, they should all be encrypted, password protected. And then, yes, you should have a firewall protecting your network from the outside world. So those are the 2 things that I would suggest.
I mean, is DocuSign encrypted, in your opinion?
All right. DocuSign on the cloud is encrypted. But the moment you click download button and load it onto your computer, it is no longer encrypted. This is why, again, Jackie talked about this, to where if you download anything on your laptop, it is no longer encrypted. That's why you should use the cloud-based stuff. But so.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What are ways to stop RAT attacks?
So rats, remote access Trojans. So to me, security is like an onion, right? There's that analogy. It's in layers. So number 1, you have your firewalls to stop the bad traffic. Number 2, you need what's called host, like DLP. Like we use ESET. There's other tools that if you click on something and it tries to install a rat, a remote access Trojan, the software on your laptop says, whoa, this is not a good thing. Are you sure you want to do it? And it takes a administrator to override it. So I personally am not the administrator, so I wouldn't be able to even install that on my computer. So again, I would say data loss protection, antivirus, security, and then firewalls to handle the network overall.
Okay. Next question. How often should we do phishing email tests for our employees?
Every day. Literally, we have them come to us throughout the month. So we have a monthly test where the results of that test are then put together, and our team knows who passed, who didn't. But they come to us randomly. And so throughout the month, it's not, I mean, you don't want to announce, okay, today is email testing day, because everybody's going to be on alert. You want them to come randomly throughout the month, mixed in with good emails and potentially other bad emails, so that folks are always on their toes.
Thank you. The next question is, are there any security related tools that you know of that are available free to nonprofits?
Yes, there's a website called TechSoup, for those of you who don't know, and you can get discounted or free services and software. So go to TechSoup, create an application, tell them all about your nonprofit, and then there's different sections for different kinds of software, and see what's available to you through TechSoup. Now, the reason I went that route to say just go free antivirus on Google, right? What you want is you want software from a reputable firm that is simply discounted or free to a nonprofit. You want to stay away from things that are quote unquote free, because typically they gather information and use it for marketing and other purposes. So that's why I suggested that.
Can I just add one thing to that also, is to make sure that you're utilizing what comes with the things that you do pay for. So if you pay for a Microsoft suite, there are a lot of tools and tricks and pieces in there that you might not be utilizing that would make your network more secure.
Mhm.
And the last question was a follow-up. We send emails that contain taxes, social security numbers. If we use password protect, is this good enough for the via email? Thanks for this great information.
Technically, no, right? You should never use an email service to move that data unless it is a private, secure system. So again, in Jackie's case, for example, you can turn on secure, and if you're within a company, you could probably do that legally. But as she said, you can't even do that in their email system. It won't let you. So, and that's actually technically correct. You should not be sending anything like that. You would have a document. That document would either be password protected or encrypted, and you would use either an encrypted email service or use a third party, things like Dropbox, but not the free Dropbox, because that's open to the public. You would want a commercial version that is encrypted, password protected, and you can exchange documents through a secure service like a Dropbox. But again, it has to be paid Dropbox, not a free Dropbox.
Yes, thank you. And Jackie, yes, we had those questions answered, but you're welcome to weigh in on them if you'd like.
Actually, it was the one above that I don't think we answered. The question was, what are some challenges that you face when setting up security protocols? And then you mentioned a monitoring service that you use to track your employee when your employees are on the server, and ask for the name of that service. So the challenges, some of the challenges, and I'm sure Ross deals with this all the time too, because he has membership organizations who he has to get acquainted with the security policy. So I'll let him answer it as well. But for us, it's really adherence. You know, getting client counselors and frontline staff and other folks to not click on emails and follow policies and procedures, just the same as anybody else. And so awareness is probably our biggest line of defense, is just keeping it front and center and making people always aware of these things, and that every email, especially, I mean, that is our biggest vulnerability, is that any email from anywhere could have something damaging in it. Just take a breather, take a look at it. Don't click on the Taylor Swift tickets, Jackie. And no, just take a second. We live by email, and they come at us fast and furious, and we're constantly working to get through this stuff, but just take a breather. Sit back and take a minute to look at these things. And then as far as the company that we use KnowBe4. They do such a fabulous job of keeping those phishing tests coming through to us. I couldn't tell you what is a test. Like the Taylor Swift email, I don't know if that's a test that came through KnowBe4, or if that really is some external phishing attempt. It could have been either one. I didn't click on it. Yay. So they do such a good job of making these things look real. They give us reporting, so our security team always knows where we stand. It also immediately gives us the fail notification. So there is a cost to it, of course, but it is definitely worth the cost for this one, because it keeps it in your right in front of your staff's mind.
Thank you, Jackie and Ross. We really appreciate you answering these questions and addressing all of the needs that we have with cybersecurity attacks being on the rise. And next, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Ebony.
Thanks, Christy, for the Q&A session. We do have a couple more questions that popped up. So Ross and Jackie, if you don't mind answering those questions, that'd be great. So one of them says, if client sends us PDFs with their sensitive information, is that safe?
Okay. Is it safe, right? Is it safe for whom? So number one, if their machine is infected, they send you a PDF that's infected, you've now exposed your agency. So now, if you're asking if their data is safe, what I would say is do a password protected PDF. If they create a PDF, create a password for it. And then, once you know that the transmission is right, your software scans it, your firewall scans it, your laptop scans it, and you got this thing and you know it's safe, then at that point, it should be password protected. Okay, so that's technically the regulation.
Thank you so much for that. Another question is Outlook encryption. There's an Outlook encryption option. Do you still want to avoid or send sensitive information? Do you understand that question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Jackie, do you want to take it?
I mean, we definitely internally use the encryption option, but again, even if I encrypt it, our system blocks the sensitive information. I can send a little bit of identifying information, but I can't send anything that looks like social security number or account number at all. So yeah,
exactly. I would say, use it. Technically, you should still avoid it, but use the encryption option in most cases anyway, right?
But Ross, and you said this earlier, there are better ways to share documents. And that's basically what you're doing. If you're needing to share this kind of information, it's generally a document. And there are safer, more secure places for your clients to put the document and for you to put a document if you need to get it back to them. Way better than trying to send things like that through email.
Thank you, guys. One last question. It says, what if our data system downloads each document we try to view for counseling sessions?
Okay. Well, okay, it's kind of hard to tell, but you download, you should be able to view it online, or if you view it and you have to download it to view it, but then delete it, right? And keep it up there. That's okay as well, as long as you just don't keep it lying around. It has to download it from the server so you could view it, right? Anyway, a lot of times it'll put a copy either for the entire session or just download it. And that's okay, as long as you know to then, remove it afterwards if you just have a computer, or as Jackie described and I talked about earlier, view it in the tool and hope it's online, right? So, but yeah, you can download things to your machine to view it. A lot of times you have to, right? There's no other choice. But then once you're done viewing it, make sure you clean it up.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And that is our last question for the day. I want to say thank you to both Ross and Jackie for your time, and most importantly, the information that you provided us all today.